Today we'll be covering how to make Yasuke unkillable and Naoe impossible to get seen in stealth, and a whole bunch of other incredible abilities that you should be running for both of the characters in Assassin's Creed Shadows. Let's go! Let me know in the comments who you're playing as the most, Naoe or Yasuke. Speaking of, let's start with the samurai. So Yasuke's abilities are a little bit more weapon focused than Naoe because he has so many weapon options. So realistically, like a lot of the initial sort of decisions around where you're going to put your ability points is a little bit up to you, and it does depend on the weapon type you're actually using. Now, something I will mention as well is to not waste your mastery points by putting them into a weapon skill tree. If you're not actually using that weapon, just reset them and move them to another tree. Something else to note is that the passives on the left-hand side of those trees will actually still give you benefits. So for example, say if you're not using like a long katana, you still should be getting the combat expert perks in that line because they will increase your overall melee damage. There's no reason not to grab those passives anyway. Now, speaking of those weapons, just a bit of an overview. The long katana is basically like an all-rounder weapon, still a very solid option to use. The naginata is, in my opinion, the weakest of his 3 melee weapons, but it's a bit more AoE focused, as you can sort of swing that big weapon around a bit. And the konobo is very high damage and also high stun, very easy to break enemies' guard, posture, and it's just like a ton of fun to smack enemies around with a big stick. So I prefer the long katana or the konobo, so it is a little bit up to you. Now, speaking of the konobo, there is some really good abilities in that line, like the crushing shockwave, a downward strike that deals ability damage and disables the targets in the area and staggers them back. Fantastic for when you get surrounded as Yasuke, which definitely happens because everyone focuses on you and like charges at you. And the slugging rampage is like a spinning circle attack to deal some like AoE damage. And it's also got the devastation konobo passive, which is fantastic as well. So you switch attack types, so either doing like an R1 light combo or an R2 heavy combo at the end of a combo to trigger an additional combo ender, so you can deal additional damage that way as well. Lots of benefits to the konobo, definitely, as well as the other weapons, but I've just found that this is a fantastic option for melee users. Now, for ranged, you've got the teppo or the bow. Personally, I do highly recommend to lean the bow for a couple of reasons. Now, the first being that there is a passive called silent arrows. This is a new arrow type that essentially gives you an assassination arrow on your bow. So it will remove 4 health segments with headshots on unsuspecting enemies. You can buff this as well, but it's just essentially the only real way that Yasuke can do like silent stealth assassinations. The other arrow types, like the poison ones or the bleed ones, are also fantastic, and then there are great abilities down this line as well, like Clear Mind, which is a bow ability that slows down time. So if enemies do see you, you can slow down time briefly and use that to line up some headshots and finish them off. And you can like combo this with the silent arrows to do like double assassinations because you're slowing down time, so you can line up multiple headshots without them actually realizing. Now, obviously, you want to grab the passives like the larger quiver in this line so that you can equip more arrows at a time, because you will go through those arrows quite quickly. Same as if you were using the teppo, but like the bow, in my opinion, is just the stronger option overall. But the best actual abilities to think about for Yasuke actually are in the samurai line, which is his like main overall general line. Firstly, there is the brutal assassination, which you should obviously be picking up. This gives Yasuke his only assassination option for melee range, except it will cause him to yell and scream for some reason, which draws the attention of enemies that are nearby. But you can still get a couple of these off to start encounters. Really good to use on elites to get a little bit of that health chip off before the combat counter actually starts. Now, there are 3 active abilities in the samurai line, but you can only have 1 equipped at once. One of them is like the battle kick, and then you've got the impenetrable defense, and then there is battle cry. Battle cry absolutely is the strongest one here, hands down, especially once you have upgraded it. Once you have upgraded this, not only will it do the initial stagger all enemies within 10 meters of you, it will also increase the amount of damage you do for the enemies that are affected by this. It can also reduce the amount of damage you take, and it gives you a HP return as well when you have leveled this out. So essentially, this makes you unkillable when you can get all of the benefits to the adrenaline chunks, as well as lowering how long it takes for this to refresh. You can just like spam this in encounters and take out a bunch of guardians and elites using the konobo here to just absolutely shred through enemies. It's one of the best abilities that you can get in the game because it just makes Yasuke even better than he already is. There are also some good passives in the samurai line and in the other lines as well, but regeneration will restore a percentage percentage of your health when you kill enemies, which is the main thing you'll be doing as Yasuke in combat. So he just gives you a little bit of that health back, which is absolutely fantastic. Let's move on to Naoe. Now, Naoe's choices for abilities are quite different to Yasuke, as she's less focused on straight up combat and more about the overall flexibility of her kit. We'll start with weapons, just like we did with Yasuke. Again, a little bit up to you. However, I would recommend to always have a Tanto. We'll get into why, but also, like I mentioned, don't waste those mastery points on a weapon line that you're not actually using, but do grab the passives on the left-hand side. For example, say if you're not running a Kusagami, but you're using like an affliction sort of build, you're doing like bleed and poison build up, the affliction builder passive is actually in that line, which is fantastic to grab. Or if you're not using a katana, you can then grab the melee expert passive on the left-hand side as well. Now, I do think you should always be running a Tanto, but then you've really got the option to either run a katana, which is your all-around typical attack weapon, and then the Kusarigama, which is a bit more AoE focused, which is good if Naoe gets surrounded, but you can deal with that in other ways, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video too. So typically I've sort of gone a katana and a Tanto as my main weapons because I like the all-around damage from the katana and then the status effects and the assassination bonuses you get from the Tanto. Plus, the Tanto has one of the best active abilities for Naoe, which is Shadow Barrage. So Naoe will automatically perform a quick evade before getting hit. This lasts 20 seconds and up to a certain amount of hits depending on how much you upgrade this. Essentially, this just means when you've got the Tantos active, you can just like spam attack and you'll automatically dodge those attacks that are coming towards you. Really great for Naoe if, say, you're trying to do an assassination, you only chip off most of their health. You can use this to essentially guarantee yourself the kill because they won't be able to attack you. You can then follow this up, finish them off, move on. It really helps with Naoe because avoiding damage is her main crux, because she's fantastic to actually like use in combat and just attack enemies. But when you make a mistake and you do get hit, that's the real kicker. So I've really found that Shadow Barrage is really beneficial. Moving on to the assassin line, we might start with the double assassination here because this is also the main reason why we're running a Tanto. So with a Tanto, even if it's not your active weapon, you just have to have it equipped. You can use the double assassination, which, as it says on the tin, it allows you to assassinate 2 enemies for a single attack. Fantastic to use because there's a lot of enemies where, funnily enough, there's just 2 of them standing next to each other talking. Happens all the time. You can take out both of them from the air, from the ground. Works either way. Fantastic to use. Now, as we are talking about assassinations and that whole assassinating thing, obviously grabbing the assassination damage in the Hidden Blade line of progression in the skill tree is fantastic. This will increase the amount of health segments that it removes when you do deal assassinations. However, just something to note, if you don't like the whole health segments thing, you can actually turn this off via the guaranteed assassinations option in your gameplay difficulty settings. So if you do want to do that, you can just turn that on and then you're just guaranteed always to assassinate enemies regardless. Saves you actually those mastery points as well if you wanted to spend them elsewhere, but it's just something that you can turn on or leave off. It's entirely up to you. It doesn't affect me or anyone else in the comment section, even if they tell you that you should run with it on or off. Honestly, who cares?
Nobody cares.
But regardless of your guaranteed assassinations option, you should be running Hand of the Creed, so the Hidden Blade can no longer be denied when enemies see Naoe. This does happen a bit, especially with elites when they like turn around just as you're about to assassinate them. This essentially just prevents that from happening, where they can stop that assassination attempt and you can always guarantee that hit regardless of whether they're looking at you or not. In the Shinobi line, there's some fantastic options to grab. There's a active ability called Heightened Senses, which is in the intro how I mentioned how you can essentially just like never get spotted with Naoe. So while undetected, time slows down around Naoe for 8 seconds. This aborts on enemy contact. Enemy contact is actually you assassinating or making contact, attacking them, not them actually seeing you, right? Now, because time is slowed down, you can essentially just stand in front of the enemies while that slowdown effect is active. So if you need to like get through somewhere or sneak through somewhere or assassinate enemies that maybe people are looking at, this does help you move faster, get through areas that you're trying to get through, as well as assassinate enemies without actually being seen. Another one to grab in this line is just a passive that is fantastic. It's Ascension Boost. So while using the grappling hook, Naoe can climb much faster. Not a ton to say here, really. It's just like you're going to be using the grappling hook all the time with Naoe. The faster you can climb, the better. Obviously, there's no downsides to that. And then in the tools line, there's some fantastic upgrades here. Obviously, you want to grab all of the tools themselves, like the smoke bomb and the shuriken and the bell. You don't unlock those automatically. You have to actually put the points in the mastery lines to get them. And they're all fantastic. Like Naoe is extremely strong with access to these tools. And on the left-hand side, grab the larger tool bag passives to increase the maximum capacity of how many you can carry. The kunai assassinate levels is fantastic to grab here. It's Naoe's only real ranged assassination option, so you can headshot one-shot enemies with kunai from range and assassinate them that way. Leveling this up the same way you do your assassination damage is fantastic. So there's always sometimes enemies that you just can't get to without them like seeing you. Heightened senses can make a difference there, but then this just allows you to take them out from range as well as another fantastic option. Something to note about just these tools in general is that Naoe's gear actually interacts with these quite effectively. There's a lot of gear that will add status effects to them, like say poison buildup or bleed buildup, or just overall like their attack damage, even getting tools back on kills, which is fantastic. So just something to note that paying attention to the gear as well if you're using a lot of these tools, but then obviously leveling up through that mastery line is definitely beneficial. But if you want to know some more general tips for Yasuke and Naoe, check out my Ultimate Beginner's Guide, which I'll link right here for you to watch next. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Naoe, and I hope you have a great day.